Okay, chain adjustment. Basically how you measure this is you go through the triangular part on the swing arm down here, and I've only got an inch tape measure, so what I did was 5 to 7/16 is about close enough to 9 to 11 millimeters, which is the factory spec. And what I do is I go from the half-inch mark, and I marked a little black range that the chain should be within to signify the 9 to 11 millimeters. And basically from the center of a chain's pin to the top of this swing arm opening is where you want to be in spec. So right here it's in spec. And if you give a tug down on the swing arm before you measure, that ensures that all the slack is set on the chain. You don't want to be pulling down on the chain when you make this measurement, or you'll be way tight. But this is kind of what you want to shoot for. And I'll show you guys how to tighten and loosen the chain in just a sec. Alright, so these are the two bolts, the two large bolts in the middle of the frame are what you're going to need to loosen up in order to get the eccentric loosened up for the chain adjustment. Once those two bolts are loosened up, you want to make sure that they're very loose, otherwise you'll still have a little bit pinching on the eccentric hub. And the eccentric hub is back in here. You can kind of see the tooth in there. That's where a spanner hooks onto, or you can tap it lightly with a screwdriver. You might be able to get a better view here. It's basically that silver disc behind your sprocket, and you turn that clockwise or counterclockwise to add and remove slack from the chain, and that is what gives you your plus-minus adjustment. Now, something to note is that they say that you're supposed to adjust the chain with the bike on its side stand, but I did a measurement with the bike on the side stand and on my motor manufacturing stand, and the measurement was exactly the same. So because there's such a straight line, the way that the rear suspension of the bike forms kind of a straight line from here all the way back, you don't have nearly as much deflection, so the chain isn't getting nearly as tight or loose as other bikes where the swing arm forms kind of a triangular shape. So that means that you can have your bike up on your motor manufacturing stand, maybe a rear stand, and you won't have a whole lot of variance in your chain slack when you measure it. So that's a good thing to note. But all you have to do is just loosen up those two nuts back here, and just turn that eccentric left or right. You can tap it with a screwdriver from below, or you can use a spanner tool, which looks like this. And I've had this spanner and other spanners for my Triumph Speed Triple to adjust its swing arm and everything too. So it's a great tool to have in your kit, especially when you're on road trips in case your chain gets a little bit slack or a little bit tight. So that's it. That's all you really need to adjust the chain. It's not a big deal. I'll be right back with the size hex key you'll need to loosen up those two bolts, but those are the only tools you'll need, is just the hex key to loosen the bolts and a spanner. Okay, so the hex key or hex socket that you'll need is a big old 10 millimeter. Those bolts are actually pretty huge, and I would go with a hex socket rather than a hex key like this, because you'll be able to get a bit more leverage with a breaker bar or just a long ratchet wrench. But that's what you'll need: a spanner, 10 millimeter Allen, hex key, hex socket, and that is all you need to do chain adjustment. So hope that alleviated some fears and gave you an idea of how to adjust the chain. Oh, and one last thing, if you are hearing the characteristic chain clunk, like every time you shift on the Diavel, that's a sign that your chain is too loose. So if you go back into spec, 9 to 11 millimeters, 5 to 7/16 inch, that clonk will actually completely disappear, as it did on my bike. So the reason that happens is when you shift, it puts a little stress on the chain. It gets a little tight and it causes the chain to slap up, and If you take the slack out, it doesn't have nearly as much slack to slap up, so the clonk disappears. So that'll give you an idea of when it's time to tighten up your chain or do an adjustment. Hope that helps. Bye.